Hi, I'm Nathan Collins. At my wife's family reunion, they laughed at my discount store jacket, mocked my scuffed sneakers, whispered that I was dragging their family name through the mud, and her cousin even joked I looked like I shopped at a gas station. They didn't know the Rolls-Royce pulling up outside with my personal chauffeur was mine. But this isn't just about a car. It's about years of being treated like I wasn't good enough, like I was some charity case they had to tolerate at their perfect gatherings, dismissed by people who measured worth by designer labels and country club memberships. So let me ask you, have you ever been judged by people who never bothered to know your real story? Because that afternoon, they finally learned the truth, and not everyone left with their pride intact. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the circular driveway of Ashford Estate. The place looked like something out of a design magazine, all stone archways and manicured hedges, with those tall iron gates that screamed old money. I'd driven past this estate a dozen times over the years, always as a guest, never quite feeling like I belonged. Today felt no different. I stepped out of my Ford sedan, smoothing down the front of my navy jacket. It was clean, pressed even, but I knew it wasn't enough, not for them. I could already see the way eyes would drift to my shoes, the ones I'd worn through 2 seasons because they were comfortable, and I saw no reason to replace them. Practical. That's what I called it. They'd call it something else. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, heavy cardstock with elegant script. The Thornwell family cordially invites you to the annual reunion at Ashford Estate. There was no warmth in it, just formality. My wife Evelyn's family didn't do warmth. They did appearances. I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought from the passenger seat, a decent mid-range red, nothing flashy. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. That ship had sailed years ago when I realized no matter what I did, it would never be enough for these people. The front door was already open, and I could hear the hum of conversation spilling out onto the columned porch. Laughter. The clinking of glasses. The kind of ease that comes from people who've never had to worry about anything real. I walked in, and the first person I saw was Evelyn's cousin, Piper Stone, holding court near the grand staircase in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She spotted me immediately. Her eyes did that quick scan, head to toe, the kind that takes inventory and finds you lacking in under 2 seconds. Her smile was tight, polite, poisonous. "Nathan," she said, drawing out my name like it was something she had to force through her teeth. "You made it. We were wondering if you'd show." I offered a nod. Wouldn't miss it. Her friend, some woman I'd met once at a wedding and immediately forgot, leaned in and whispered something. They both glanced at my shoes. I caught it. The slight curl of her lip, the barely concealed smirk. I said nothing. "Is that for the bar?" Piper asked, gesturing to the wine bottle in my hand. Thought I'd bring something to share. She took it from me with 2 fingers, like it might contaminate her. How thoughtful. "I'll make sure it gets to the kitchen." Translation. It would end up on a back shelf somewhere, never opened, quietly discarded after the event. I let her take it. Wasn't worth the fight. The great room was filled with Thornwells and their extended circle. Evelyn's brother, Victor Malone, stood by the fireplace in a tailored suit that fit like it had been sewn onto him. His wife draped herself over the arm of a leather chair, dripping in jewelry that caught the afternoon light. I recognized a few others, aunts, uncles, people who'd never bothered to learn my name but had no problem forming opinions about me. I found a seat near the corner, away from the main crowd. A small table with glasses of sparkling water sat beside me. I poured myself one and settled in, trying to look like I had a purpose for being in that exact spot. That's when Victor noticed me. "Nathan," he called out, loud enough to turn heads. "Glad you could join us. Evelyn said you were tied up with work." I kept my expression neutral. "Managed to clear my schedule." He walked over, drink in hand, that same condescending grin I'd seen at every family event for the past decade. "Still doing that consulting thing? What was it again? Small business logistics?" "Something like that." He laughed. A short bark that wasn't really a laugh at all. "Must be nice, working from home in your pajamas. Flexible hours, no boss breathing down your neck." A few people nearby chuckled. I didn't respond. "You know," Victor continued, emboldened by his audience, "I was just telling Caroline here about you." I said, "Nathan's the kind of guy who proves you don't need a corner office to be happy. Some people are just content with simple." Simple. That word hung in the air like a slap. Caroline, whoever she was, tilted her head sympathetically. "There's nothing wrong with modest ambitions. The world needs all types." I took a slow sip of water. Let them think what they wanted. Let them build their little narratives. I'd learned a long time ago that defending yourself to people who've already made up their minds is a waste of breath. Evelyn finally appeared from the hallway, looking radiant in a cream-colored dress that fit the estate's aesthetic perfectly. She belonged here in a way I never would. She caught my eye for half a second, then turned to greet her aunt with a bright smile and an enthusiastic hug. She didn't come over. Didn't acknowledge me beyond that fleeting glance. I wasn't surprised. This was her world, and I was just a guest she had to explain. Victor leaned against the mantel, still holding court. "You know what I love about these gatherings? It reminds you what's important. Family, legacy, maintaining standards." He wasn't talking to me, but I knew the message was aimed my direction. Piper reappeared with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, passing them around with the grace of someone who'd been trained in hostessing since birth. When she got to me, she paused. "I wasn't sure if you'd want any," she said sweetly. "I know some of these ingredients can be a bit exotic." Translation: I wouldn't know quality if it was placed in front of me. I took one anyway. "Thanks." She moved on, and I heard her whisper to the woman beside her. "He tries, bless him." The afternoon dragged on like that. Small cuts, subtle digs, comments wrapped in politeness but soaked in contempt. No one was outright cruel. That wasn't their style. They were too refined for that. Instead, they made you feel small without ever raising their voices. At one point, Evelyn's father, Harold Thornwell, stood to make an announcement. He was the patriarch, the man who'd built the family's reputation in real estate development, the one everyone deferred to. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he began, his voice booming with authority. "This family has always stood for excellence, integrity, and achievement. We've built something that will last generations." He paused, letting his words settle. "And we've always known how to recognize quality." His eyes swept the room, lingering on certain people, skipping over others. When his gaze passed over me, it didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. To the Thornwells, he raised his glass, and to those who truly understand what it means to uphold a legacy. The room erupted in applause and clinking glasses. I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap, watching the performance. Evelyn stood beside her father, beaming. She didn't look my way. I glanced at my watch. It was 3:47 p.m., right on schedule. Outside, in the distance, I heard it, faint at first, a low, steady hum. The kind of sound that starts in your chest before your ears catch it. A few heads turned toward the windows. The hum grew louder. I stood slowly, setting my glass down on the small table beside me. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The sound became unmistakable, the deep, elegant purr of a Rolls-Royce engine, smooth as silk, rolling up the long driveway. Conversations faltered. People moved toward the windows. I walked toward the door, hands in my pockets, steady, calm, like I'd done this 1,000 times before. The car came into full view, midnight black, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, every inch of it screaming quiet, undeniable power. And there, standing beside the driver's door in a crisp uniform, was James, my chauffeur. He opened the rear door and stood at attention. The room had gone completely silent. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just walked out the front door, down the stone steps, and let them watch. I didn't look back as I stepped out onto the porch, but I could feel every pair of eyes locked on me. The Rolls-Royce sat there like a monument, impossible to ignore, impossible to explain away. James stood beside it, perfectly still, professional, waiting. I walked down the steps slowly, letting the moment stretch. Gravel crunched under my feet, the only sound cutting through the stunned silence behind me. When I reached the car, James gave a subtle nod. "Good afternoon, Mr. Collins." "Afternoon, James." I didn't get in, not yet. Instead, I turned back toward the house. They were all crowded at the windows now, some had even stepped out onto the porch. Victor's mouth hung slightly open. Piper had her hand pressed to her chest like she'd just witnessed a miracle. Harold stood frozen, glass still raised mid-toast. And Evelyn. She stood at the top of the steps, her face unreadable, caught somewhere between shock and something that looked like fear. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I let the silence hold for another beat, then walked back up the steps. Not quickly, not with any urgency. Just steady, deliberate, like a man who had all the time in the world. When I reached the top, I stopped in front of Harold. He'd lowered his glass by then, but his hand still trembled slightly. "Apologies for the interruption," I said evenly. "I had a call I needed to take. Work, you know how it is." No one responded. No clever remarks. No condescending smiles. I walked past them, back into the great room, and reclaimed my seat in the corner. Poured myself another glass of water. The room slowly, awkwardly, tried to return to normal. Conversations restarted, but they were stilted now, forced. People kept glancing toward the windows, toward the car that sat in the driveway like an accusation. Victor was the first to approach me. His confidence had cracked, but he was trying to hold on to the pieces. "That's quite a car," he said, attempting casual and failing miserably. "It gets the job done." Is that yours?" I looked at him directly. Would I be standing next to it if it wasn't? He laughed nervously. "Right, of course. We didn't know you were doing so well." "You never asked." That landed harder than I intended, but I didn't take it back. He shifted his weight, glanced around like he was looking for a lifeline, then excused himself. Piper was next. She approached with a tray of champagne, offering me a glass with a smile that was now entirely different. Eager. Apologetic. "Nathan, I had no idea you were so, successful." I took the glass but didn't drink. "Does it matter?" She blinked, confused. "I'm sorry." "Whether I'm successful or not, does it actually matter to how you treat people?" Her smile faltered. She opened her mouth, closed it, then walked away without another word. Evelyn finally made her way over. She sat down in the chair beside me, crossing her legs, maintaining her composure even as I could see the tension in her jaw. "You could have told me," she said quietly. "Told you what?" "That you were bringing the car. That you were going to, make a statement." I set the champagne glass down. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "They're my family, Nathan. And I'm your husband." She looked away, out toward the windows where the Rolls-Royce still sat, patient and unmovable. "You made me look foolish," she said. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "I made you look foolish? Evelyn, I've spent years being the punchline at these gatherings. The guy who doesn't measure up. The one everyone tolerates because he married into the family. And not once, not one single time, did you stand up and tell them to stop." Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Before she could respond, Harold's voice boomed across the room. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." The room quieted again. Harold stood at the front, commanding the space like always. But this time, there was something different in his tone. Something careful. "I think we've all had a bit of a surprise this afternoon," he began, forcing a chuckle that no one joined. "And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our guest of honor." He gestured toward me. I didn't move. "Nathan has clearly done very well for himself, and I think that deserves recognition. We're all very proud." The word proud came out stiff, rehearsed, like he was reading from a script he didn't believe. A smattering of polite applause followed, hollow, obligatory. I stood, and the room fell silent again. "Thank you, Harold," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But I'm not here for recognition. I'm here because Evelyn asked me to come, because despite everything, I still show up." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I've listened to the jokes, the comments about my clothes, my work, my worth. I've sat quietly while you all made assumptions about who I am based on what I drive or where I shop. And I never said anything because I didn't need to prove myself to you. Victor shifted uncomfortably. Piper stared at her shoes. "But here's the thing," I continued. "Respect isn't something you give based on someone's bank account or their last name. It's something you give because they're human. And if you can't do that, then all the money and estates and designer clothes in the world won't make you better than anyone." The room was a tomb. I looked at Evelyn. She was staring at me, eyes wide, like she was seeing me for the first time. "I'll be outside if anyone needs me," I said simply, then turned and walked toward the door. This time, no one stopped me. I stepped back out into the afternoon sun, the warmth hitting my face as I descended the stone steps. James was still standing by the Rolls-Royce, hands clasped behind his back, posture perfect. He didn't ask questions. He never did. That's why I trusted him. "Everything all right, sir?" he asked as I approached. "Fine, James. Just needed some air." He nodded once, understanding without needing details. "Shall I prepare to leave?" "Not yet. Give it another hour." "Very good, sir." I walked past the car, toward the edge of the estate grounds where a stone pathway led into a small garden. It was quieter here, away from the windows and the watching eyes. I found a bench beneath an old oak tree and sat down, letting the noise in my head settle. I wasn't angry. That's what surprised me most. I thought I would be. Thought standing up in front of them all would feel like vindication, like a fire finally released. But it didn't. It felt more like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. Relief, not rage. I heard footsteps behind me, light, hesitant. I didn't turn around, but I knew who it was. "Can I sit?" Evelyn asked softly. I gestured to the empty space beside me. She sat down, smoothing her dress, keeping a careful distance between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, listening to the birds and the rustle of leaves overhead. "I'm sorry," she finally said. I glanced at her. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on something far away, maybe nothing at all. "For what?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "For not saying anything. For letting them treat you that way." I nodded slowly. "Why didn't you?" She took a breath, exhaled shakily. "Because it was easier not to. Because if I defended you, I'd have to admit that I chose you over their approval. And I wasn't ready to do that." Her honesty stung more than any insult from her family ever had. "Are you ready now?" I asked. She turned to look at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty, vulnerability. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know I should have been ready a long time ago." I looked away, back toward the garden path. "I didn't bring the car to embarrass you, Evelyn. I brought it because I'm tired of being invisible. Tired of being treated like I don't matter." "You do matter," she said quickly. "To who? To you?" "Because it hasn't felt that way in a while." She flinched, but didn't argue. We sat in silence again. This time it felt heavier, like the weight of all the years we'd avoided this conversation was finally pressing down on us. "I didn't know you had that kind of money," she said eventually. I almost laughed. Would it have made a difference? I don't know, maybe. "That's the problem, Evelyn. It shouldn't matter. I'm the same person I was this morning, last year, the day you married me. The only thing that's changed is what you know about my bank account." She bit her lip, eyes glistening. "I know that's not fair." "No, it's not." Another pause. Then she asked, "How long have you had it? The car, the money, all of it?" I leaned back against the bench, considering how much to tell her. How much she deserved to know. 5 years, I said finally, give or take. Her head snapped toward me. 5 years? "Nathan, we've been struggling to pay bills, cutting back on everything, and you've had money this whole time?" "We haven't been struggling," I corrected. "You thought we were struggling because I didn't spend like your family does. There's a difference." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd stay with me when you thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if I was enough without the money." The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. She stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. "That's not fair. You tested me." "You failed me," I shot back, standing to face her. "Every time your family made a joke, every time they looked down on me, you stayed silent. You let them believe I was less than. So yeah, I wanted to know who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer." Tears streamed down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. "I never thought you had nothing to offer." "Then why didn't you defend me?" She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but couldn't bring herself to say it. I softened my tone. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Evelyn. But I need you to understand what it's been like. Walking into that house, year after year, knowing I'm not welcome. Knowing your family thinks you married down. And knowing you've never once told them they're wrong. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I couldn't. Not yet. I need some time, she whispered through her hands. Take all the time you need. She lowered her hands, mascara smudged, eyes red. Are you leaving me? I don't know, I said honestly. But I know I can't keep living like this. Pretending I'm okay with being disrespected. Pretending it doesn't matter. She nodded, tears still falling, then turned and walked back toward the house. I watched her go, feeling the emptiness settle in where anger used to live. James appeared at the edge of the garden path, hands still clasped behind his back. Shall I bring the car around, sir? I looked back at the estate, at the windows filled with faces pretending not to watch. Not yet, James, let them wonder a little longer. He nodded and disappeared back toward the driveway. I sat back down on the bench, alone again, and pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls. 2 from my business partner, 1 from my attorney. I didn't return them, not yet. Instead, I opened my photos and scrolled back 5 years. There was a picture of Evelyn and me on our anniversary. We looked happy. She was laughing at something I'd said, her hand on my chest, my arm around her waist. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to be that version of us. Then I closed the app and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden. I could hear voices from the house, muffled and distant, probably dissecting everything that had just happened. Let them talk. I'd spent years being the topic of their conversations. At least now they'd finally have something real to discuss. I stayed in the garden for another 20 minutes, letting the afternoon settle around me like a blanket. The sounds from the estate had changed, less laughter now, more hushed conversation. I could picture them in there, huddled in small groups, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Trying to reconcile the man they'd dismissed for years with the one who'd just walked out of a Rolls-Royce. When I finally stood and made my way back toward the house, the sun had shifted, casting the estate in a golden light that made it look almost peaceful. Almost. James was waiting by the car, patient as ever. As I approached, he straightened slightly. Sir, there have been several individuals asking about the vehicle. I have maintained discretion, but I thought you should know. I nodded. Thank you, James. What did you tell them? Only that I'm employed by you, sir. Nothing more. Perfect. I walked past the car and back up the steps. The front door was still open, and I could see people moving around inside, but the energy had completely shifted. Where there had been casual arrogance before, now there was careful curiosity. When I stepped back into the great room, conversations didn't stop entirely, but they quieted. Eyes followed me as I made my way back to my corner seat. I didn't acknowledge anyone, just picked up the glass of water I'd left and took a slow sip. Victor was the first to break. He approached with his hands in his pockets, trying to appear casual but failing miserably. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like humility. Nathan, listen, I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot earlier. I set my glass down and looked at him directly. Did we? He shifted his weight. I mean, I didn't know about your success, your business ventures. If you'd known what? I interrupted. You would have treated me with basic respect? That's not really how respect works, Victor. His face reddened. I'm just saying, we clearly misjudged your situation. My situation hasn't changed. Your perception of it has. There's a difference. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. After a moment, he nodded stiffly and walked away. Piper approached next, this time without a tray, without a purpose beyond damage control. Her earlier condescension had been replaced with something approaching nervousness. Nathan, I hope you know we never meant any harm. It's just, well, we didn't realize you were doing so well for yourself. The car outside, it's absolutely stunning. It's just a car, Piper. Oh, but it's a Rolls-Royce. Those aren't exactly common. Neither is basic human decency, apparently. She blinked, taken aback. I don't think that's fair. We've always been welcoming. I leaned forward slightly. Welcoming? You've spent the better part of every family gathering for the past decade making jokes about my clothes, my career, my life. You've whispered behind my back. made assumptions about who I am based on what I wear. And now, because you've seen an expensive car, suddenly I'm worth your time? Her face went pale. I didn't think. That's the problem. You didn't think. None of you did. You just assumed. She stammered something that might have been an apology, then retreated quickly. I watched her go, feeling no satisfaction in the confrontation. Just tired. Tired of having to explain basic dignity to people who should have known better. Harold appeared in the doorway to his study, beckoning me with a subtle gesture. I considered ignoring it, but decided this conversation was inevitable. Might as well get it over with. I stood and walked across the great room. People parted slightly as I passed, like I was suddenly someone who required space. The irony wasn't lost on me. Harold's study was exactly what you'd expect. Dark wood, leather-bound books, a massive desk that dominated the room. Trophies and awards lined the shelves, each one carefully positioned to communicate success, power, legacy. He closed the door behind me and gestured to one of the leather chairs. Please, sit. I remained standing. I'm fine here. He nodded slowly, moving behind his desk, but not sitting either. I wanted to speak with you privately, away from all the noise out there. I waited. I'll be direct, Nathan. I misjudged you. We all did. And for that, I apologize. The apology sounded rehearsed, political. The kind you give when circumstances demand it, not because you mean it. What exactly are you apologizing for? I asked. He frowned slightly. For underestimating your position. Your success. It's clear you've built something significant, and I should have seen that sooner. You're apologizing for not knowing I had money. That's not the same as apologizing for treating me poorly. His jaw tightened. I don't think we treated you poorly. Then we have very different definitions of that phrase. He moved around the desk, trying to close the distance between us. Look, I'm a businessman. I recognize talent when I see it, and clearly I missed it with you. But that doesn't mean there was any malice. We simply didn't understand your potential. My potential, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. Harold, I'm the same person I was this morning. The same person I was last year, 5 years ago. The only thing that's changed is what you know about my finances. If that's what it takes to earn respect from this family, then I don't want it. His expression hardened. You're being unreasonable. I'm trying to extend an olive branch here. An olive branch would have been standing up for me when your son made jokes at my expense. An olive branch would have been including me in conversations instead of talking around me like I wasn't in the room. An olive branch would have been treating me like family because I married your daughter, not because you found out I can afford an expensive car. Silence filled the study, thick and uncomfortable. Harold's voice dropped lower, taking on an edge. You've made your point, Nathan. But let's not pretend you're some innocent victim here. You hid your success from all of us, including my daughter. You let us believe one thing while living another. That's deceptive. I didn't hide anything, I just didn't perform for you. There's a difference. You showed up to family events looking like what? Like someone who doesn't measure worth by designer labels? Like someone who doesn't need to broadcast their success to feel validated? His face reddened. You deliberately misled this family about your financial situation. No, Harold, you deliberately assumed. I never lied. I never claimed to be struggling. You all just decided I was because I didn't fit your image of success. And instead of getting to know me, instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt, you wrote me off. He pointed toward the door. That car out there says otherwise. That car is a statement. Don't stand here and tell me you're above all this when you drove up in a vehicle that costs more than most people's homes. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're right, it is a statement. But not the one you think. I didn't bring it to impress you. I brought it because I'm done being invisible. Done being dismissed. If the only way to get your attention was to show up in something you couldn't ignore, then so be it. But that says more about you than it does about me. Harold's hands curled into fists at his sides. You're ungrateful. We welcomed you into this family. You tolerated me. There's a difference. Before he could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. It opened slightly, and Evelyn stepped in. Her eyes were still red, makeup imperfect, but her posture was straight. Dad, can I have a moment with Nathan? Harold looked between us, clearly frustrated at the interruption, but nodded curtly. Fine. We'll continue this later. He brushed past both of us and left the study, leaving the door open behind him. Evelyn closed it gently, then turned to face me. We stood there in the heavy silence of her father's domain, surrounded by all his accomplishments, all his proof of worth. "I heard some of that," she said quietly. "Good. Saves me from repeating it." She moved closer, stopping a few feet away. "You're right, about all of it. We did assume, we did dismiss you, and I let it happen." I didn't respond, just waited. "I've been thinking about what you said, about testing me, and I understand why you did it, even if it hurts. Because I failed, didn't I? I failed the test. I failed you." Her voice cracked on the last word. "This wasn't about passing or failing, Evelyn. It was about seeing who you really are when the performance stops. Who we both are." "And who am I?" she asked, tears spilling again. "Someone who cares more about what your family thinks than what's right. Someone who chose their approval over our marriage." She absorbed that like a physical blow, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't know how to fix this." "I'm not sure you can." The words hung between us, final and devastating. She wiped her eyes roughly. "So that's it? We're done?" "I don't know. Maybe. All I know is I can't keep living in the shadow of their judgment. And I can't be with someone who won't stand beside me when it matters." She nodded slowly, understanding settling over her features. "What do you want from me, Nathan?" "I want you to decide who you are. The woman who stays silent while her family tears down her husband, or someone who has the courage to choose differently. But that's your decision to make, not mine." I moved past her toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Home. James is waiting." "This is your home, too," she said weakly. I paused at the door, hand on the handle. "No, Evelyn. This was never my home. It was just a place I was allowed to visit." I walked out, leaving her standing in her father's study, surrounded by everything that had always mattered more than I did. The drive back to the city was quiet. James didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk. He simply drove, giving me space to think. The countryside rolled past the windows, green and gold in the late afternoon light, peaceful in a way that felt foreign after the tension of the estate. I let my head rest against the leather seat, eyes closed, and allowed myself to drift back to where all of this really started. Back to the beginning, before the money, before the car, before everything changed. 7 years ago, I was a different person. Or maybe I was the same person in different circumstances. It's hard to tell sometimes where the line is between who we are and what life makes us become. I'd met Evelyn at a charity fundraiser. She was volunteering. I was there with a colleague who dragged me along, claiming I needed to get out more. She wore a simple black dress, had her hair pulled back, and when she smiled at me across the registration table, something in my chest shifted. We talked for 3 hours that night. About everything and nothing. She told me about her family, about growing up in the Thornwell world of expectations and appearances. I told her about my modest upbringing, about building my consulting business from nothing, about dreams that felt too big to speak out loud. She said she liked that I was different, that I didn't care about the things her family obsessed over, that I saw her as more than just a name and a pedigree. I believed her. We dated for 18 months before I proposed. It wasn't elaborate, no flash, just the two of us on a quiet beach at sunset. She said yes without hesitation, and I thought maybe I'd found someone who saw past all the surface things. Someone who valued substance over style. The warning signs were there from the beginning, but I ignored them, the way her family looked at me during that first dinner. The questions about my business that felt more like interrogations. The subtle suggestions that maybe I should dress up more, present better, consider my image. I told myself it didn't matter, that Evelyn was different from them, that she'd chosen me knowing exactly who I was. But people don't really change, do they? They just hide who they are until it becomes too difficult to maintain the mask. The business was struggling back then. I won't pretend otherwise. Consulting is a tough field, and I was competing against firms with decades of reputation and unlimited resources. I was good at what I did, great even, but being good isn't always enough when nobody knows your name. 6 months after we got married, I hit a wall. 3 major clients left within the same quarter. Cash flow dried up. I was working 18-hour days just to keep the lights on, and it still wasn't enough. I remember the night I had to tell Evelyn we couldn't afford the apartment we'd been looking at. The one in her preferred neighborhood, with the view and the doorman and all the things she'd grown up considering standard. She said she understood. Said it didn't matter where we lived as long as we were together. But something changed in her eyes that night. Something dimmed. I started taking on jobs I would have turned down before. Smaller clients, lower pay, anything to keep revenue flowing. Pride became a luxury I couldn't afford. That's when Harold made his offer. We were at a family dinner, another awkward evening of forced conversation and thinly veiled judgment. Harold pulled me aside afterward, into that same study where we'd argued today, and made his pitch. "I know you're having difficulties with your business," he said, not unkindly. "These things happen, especially to young entrepreneurs. No shame in it." I'd nodded, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I have a proposition for you. Come work for Thornwell Development. I can give you a solid position, good salary, benefits. You'd be set." On the surface, it was generous, a lifeline when I was drowning. But I heard what he didn't say. Give up on your own thing. Admit you can't make it. Come work for me. Be dependent on me. Be forever in my debt. "I appreciate the offer," I'd said carefully, "but I think I can turn things around." His expression had shifted then, disappointment mixing with something that looked like pity. "Nathan, there's no shame in accepting help. In fact, refusing it when you need it, that's just pride, and pride doesn't pay bills." "I understand, but I need to try." He'd studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Suit yourself, but when you're ready to be realistic about your situation, the offer stands." I never took him up on it, and I never forgot the way he looked at me when I turned him down, like I was a foolish idealist who didn't understand how the real world worked. That rejection became a turning point, though I didn't realize it at the time. It crystallized something in me, a determination that had always been there but now hardened into something unbreakable. I started over. Stripped everything down to basics. Let go of the fancy office I couldn't afford. Worked from home. Cut every expense that wasn't absolutely necessary. I stopped trying to look successful and focused entirely on actually being successful. It took 2 years. 2 brutal, exhausting years of 16-hour days and constant rejection. But slowly, things started to shift. I landed a client who took a chance on me. Then another. Word spread. My reputation grew not because of marketing or appearances, but because I delivered results. By year 3, I was profitable again. By year 4, I was thriving. By year 5, I had more business than I could handle and had to start turning clients away. And somewhere in that journey, I made a decision. I decided not to tell anyone. Not Evelyn, not her family, nobody. I kept living modestly, kept dressing simply, kept driving my old car. I paid our bills quietly, never making a show of it, never drawing attention to the fact that money was no longer an issue. I told myself I was being practical, that I was saving, investing, building long-term security. But the truth was more complicated than that. I wanted to see if anyone would value me without the money. I wanted to know if Evelyn would stay with me when she thought we were struggling. If her family would accept me based on who I was rather than what I could provide. It was a test, yes, but it was also self-preservation. Because I'd seen how people changed when money entered the equation, how respect became transactional, how worth became measurable. And I refused to be valued that way. So I stayed quiet, built my wealth in silence, invested carefully, made decisions that would secure our future whether anyone knew about it or not. The Rolls-Royce was purchased 4 months ago, not because I needed it, but because I'd finally reached a point where I stopped caring about maintaining the illusion. Where I decided that if respect only came with proof, then I'd provide the proof and watch how quickly everything changed. James cleared his throat gently, pulling me back to the present. "We're approaching the city, sir. Where would you like to go?" I opened my eyes, watching the skyline come into view. "The office, James. I have some work to catch up on." "Very good, sir." The office was in a renovated building downtown, nothing ostentatious from the outside, but inside it was exactly what I needed. Clean, efficient, professional. My team knew to give me space when I needed it, and today I definitely needed it. I rode the elevator to the 12th floor, walked past the empty reception area, it was Sunday after all, and into my corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that never failed to remind me how far I'd come. I sat at my desk, powered up my computer, and pulled up the file I'd been avoiding for weeks. Financial documents, account statements, investment portfolios. Everything that proved exactly who I'd become while everyone assumed I was still struggling. And there, buried in a subfolder I'd created months ago, was something else. Something I'd discovered by accident and had been sitting on ever since. A series of transactions, money moving from accounts I recognized into accounts I didn't. Small amounts at first, then larger. Consistent. Deliberate. Someone had been skimming. And when I traced the destinations, following the digital trail through shell companies and carefully obscured transfers, I found something that made my blood run cold. The money was going to Harold Thornwell. Not directly, he was too smart for that. But through a web of intermediaries and business entities, the trail led back to him. And the source of the funds? Joint accounts. Investments Evelyn and I had made together. Money that should have been ours, being quietly siphoned away. I'd found it 3 months ago. Sat in this same chair, staring at the evidence on my screen, trying to understand what it meant. Was Evelyn involved? Did she know? Or was this Harold's doing? Manipulating accounts he'd helped her set up, taking advantage of access he'd been given when we first got married and needed financial advice. I'd hired a forensic accountant, someone discreet, someone who could trace everything without raising alarms. The report came back 2 weeks ago. Harold had been moving money for over 4 years, nearly $500,000 total, and while there was no direct evidence Evelyn knew, there were signatures, approvals, documents with her name on them. Either she was complicit, or she'd been signing things without reading them. Neither option was good. I'd planned to confront them today. That's why I'd agreed to come to the reunion, why I'd brought the Rolls-Royce, why I'd decided it was finally time to stop being silent. But the conversation had gone differently than I expected. The focus had shifted to respect and appearances rather than the deeper betrayal underneath. Maybe that was better. Maybe they needed to understand who I really was before I showed them what I knew they'd done. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been avoiding calling. It rang 3 times before a crisp, professional voice answered. Davidson and Associates, attorney at law. This is Nathan Collins. I need to schedule a meeting with Mr. Davidson, tomorrow if possible. Of course, Mr. Collins. May I ask what this is regarding? I looked out at the city, at the life I'd built while everyone assumed I had nothing. Divorce proceedings, I said quietly, and financial fraud. The next morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of weather that matched my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night reviewing documents, making notes, preparing for what was coming. By the time dawn broke, I had everything organized, every piece of evidence labeled and cross-referenced. James picked me up at 8 sharp. We drove in silence to the law offices of Davidson and Associates, a prestigious firm housed in a glass tower that reflected the cloudy sky back at itself. I'd chosen them specifically because they handled cases like this, complicated financial matters tangled up with family drama, and they had a reputation for being thorough, discreet, and ruthless when necessary. Robert Davidson met me in a conference room on the 42nd floor. He was in his mid-50s, gray hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But his eyes were sharp, alert, and when he shook my hand, his grip was firm and assured. Mr. Collins, thank you for coming in on short notice. Thank you for making time. We sat across from each other at a long mahogany table. He had a legal pad in front of him, pen ready, but he didn't write anything yet, just waited for me to begin. I slid the folder across the table. Everything's in there. Bank statements, transfer records, shell company registrations, timeline of transactions. My forensic accountant compiled it. Davidson opened the folder and began reading. His expression remained neutral as he flipped through pages, but I saw his eyebrows raise slightly when he reached the total amounts. $473,000, he read aloud, over a period of 4 years. And you're certain these funds were taken without your knowledge or consent? Completely certain. And your wife? He looked up at me. What's her involvement? That's what I need you to tell me. Her name is on some of the authorization documents, but I don't know if she understood what she was signing. Her father has always handled financial advice for her. It's possible he manipulated her into approving transfers without explaining what they were for. Davidson nodded thoughtfully. Or she could have been a willing participant. The words hit harder than I expected, even though I'd been thinking the same thing for weeks. Yes, I admitted, that's possible too. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. Walk me through the discovery. How did you find this? I explained the whole thing. How I'd been reviewing our investment accounts, noticed discrepancies, started digging deeper. How small inconsistencies led to larger patterns. How I'd hired the forensic accountant when I realized the scope of what was happening. And you haven't confronted anyone yet? Davidson asked. Not about this specifically. There was an incident yesterday at a family gathering, but it was about something else. Respect, appearances, that sort of thing. They don't know I've found the financial irregularities. Good. Keep it that way for now. The element of surprise will work in our favor. He made a few notes on his legal pad. I'll need to bring in our financial crimes specialist. Have them review everything independently. If this is what it appears to be, we're looking at embezzlement, potentially fraud, possibly wire fraud depending on how the transfers were structured. What about Evelyn? I asked. If she didn't know, if she was manipulated, can she be held liable? Davidson's expression softened slightly. That depends on a lot of factors. What she signed, what she should have reasonably known, whether she benefited from the missing funds. But if you're asking if there's a scenario where she's a victim here too, yes, that's possible. I nodded, processing that. Part of me wanted her to be innocent, wanted to believe she'd been used by her father just like I had. But another part, the part that had watched her stay silent through years of disrespect, wasn't sure what to believe anymore. What do you want the outcome to be? Davidson asked directly, because that will determine how we proceed. I took a breath. I want the money returned. I want accountability. And I want to know the truth about my wife's involvement. If she was part of this, I want a divorce. If she wasn't, if she was manipulated, then we need to have a very different conversation about our marriage and her family. Fair enough. He made more notes. I'll start by having my team verify all of this independently. Then we'll determine the best approach. If Harold Thornwell is behind this, we'll need to be strategic. Men like him don't go down easily. I'm not interested in easy, I said. I'm interested in justice. Davidson smiled, the first real expression I'd seen from him. Good. Because this is going to get complicated. We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail. He asked questions I hadn't thought of, identified gaps that needed filling, outlined the various legal paths we could take. By the time we finished, I had a clear picture of what the next few months might look like. Discovery, depositions, possibly criminal charges depending on what we found. It was exhausting just thinking about it. But it was also clarifying. For years I'd felt like something was wrong, like I was fighting invisible resistance I couldn't quite identify. Now I knew what it was. Now I had proof. As I was leaving, Davidson stopped me at the door. Mr. Collins, one more thing. Cases like this, they have a way of destroying families. Even if you win, even if you get everything you're asking for, there will be casualties. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Evelyn standing in her father's study, tears streaming down her face. Thought about Harold's red face when I challenged him. Thought about all those years of small humiliations and silent dismissals. I've been living in a destroyed family for years, I told him. I'm just making it official. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. James was waiting outside and we drove back toward my office. Halfway there, my phone rang. Evelyn. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered. Nathan. Her voice was strained, tired. We need to talk. I agree. Can you come home? To our actual home, not my parents' estate, please. I checked my watch. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Thank you. She hung up without saying goodbye. James glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Change of plans, sir? Yes. Take me to Maple Street, the apartment. Very good. The apartment Evelyn and I shared was in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy despite the fact that I could now afford much better. I'd kept it because it felt like ours, like something we'd built together before everything got complicated. When I arrived, she was sitting on the couch in the living room, still wearing the same dress from yesterday. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Hi, she said softly as I entered. Hi. I sat in the chair across from her, maintaining distance. We stayed like that for a moment, just looking at each other, years of marriage and misunderstanding sitting between us like a physical thing. I talked to my father this morning, she began. After you left yesterday, we had a long conversation, several conversations actually. I waited. He told me things. About money, about accounts, about decisions he made on our behalf. Her hands twisted in her lap. Nathan, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. My heart rate picked up. Didn't know what? That he'd been moving money. Our money. He said it was for investments, for tax purposes, for securing our future. He had me sign documents, told me they were standard financial planning materials. I trusted him. I didn't read them carefully because he's my father and I never thought. She broke off, pressing her hands to her face. I felt my jaw tighten. How much did he tell you about? He said around 400,000. Is that accurate? So she knew the approximate amount. Harold must have realized I was onto him, must have decided to get ahead of it by confessing to Evelyn first. It's accurate, I confirmed. 473,000 to be exact. She looked up at me, eyes red and swollen. I'm so sorry. I should have paid attention. Should have asked questions. But he made it sound so routine, so normal, and I just trusted him. You trusted him more than you trusted me. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. She flinched. What do you mean? You never asked me about our finances. Never wanted to be involved in planning or decisions. You just assumed I couldn't handle it, assumed your father knew better. And when he started moving money around, you signed whatever he put in front of you without even mentioning it to me. Because I thought you knew, she protested. He said you were copied on everything, that you were aware of the strategy. That stopped me. He told you I knew? Yes. He said you and he had discussed it, that this was part of a larger plan you'd both agreed to. I stood up, pacing to the window. Harold had played this perfectly. Manipulated his own daughter, forged my consent, created a situation where Evelyn thought everything was legitimate while stealing from both of us. I never agreed to anything, I said, turning back to her. I wasn't copied. I didn't know until I found the irregularities myself 3 months ago. Her face went white. 3 months? You've known for 3 months and didn't tell me? I was trying to understand the full scope before making accusations. And honestly, I wasn't sure if you were involved. That hung between us, ugly and painful. You thought I would steal from you? Her voice was barely a whisper. I thought maybe you'd chosen your family over our marriage. It wouldn't have been the first time. She stood abruptly, anger flashing in her eyes. That's not fair. Isn't it? Every time they disrespected me, you stayed quiet. Every time they made me feel like I wasn't good enough, you let it happen. Why wouldn't I think you'd side with them on this too? Because stealing is different than staying silent. Is it? They both come from the same place. Valuing them more than me. We stood there, facing each other across the living room, everything finally out in the open. What happens now? She asked finally. I've hired an attorney. He's reviewing everything. Depending on what we find, there could be criminal charges against your father. She absorbed that, shoulders sagging. And us? What about our marriage? I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to see past the hurt and confusion to who she really was underneath. I don't know, I admitted. I want to believe you didn't know. Want to believe you were manipulated. But I also know you've spent years choosing your family's approval over standing beside me. And I can't be in a marriage where I'm constantly second place. I want to choose you, she said, tears falling again. I know I haven't before, but I want to now. I want to make this right. Wanting to isn't enough, Evelyn. You have to actually do it. And that means standing up to your father, supporting me through whatever comes next, choosing our marriage even when it costs you their approval. I can do that. Can you? Because yesterday, when it mattered, you couldn't. What's changed? She wiped her eyes, straightening her spine. Yesterday, I was still trying to keep everyone happy. Trying to maintain peace. But there is no peace, is there? There's just the truth. And the truth is, my father stole from us. My family treated you terribly. And I let it all happen. Because I was too afraid to rock the boat. She moved closer, standing just a few feet away. I'm not afraid anymore, Nathan. Or maybe I am, but I'm more afraid of losing you than I am of losing their approval. So whatever you need me to do, whatever it takes, I'll do it. I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that this time would be different. But trust isn't rebuilt with words, it's rebuilt with actions, over time, through choices that prove you mean what you say. Okay, I said finally. Then here's what I need. When the attorney moves forward with this, when it becomes public and your family turns on me, I need you to stand beside me, not behind me, not in the middle trying to keep peace, beside me, supporting me publicly, clearly, without reservation. I will. And if it comes down to choosing between me and them, you choose me, every time, no hesitation. I will, she repeated, more firmly. We'll see, I said, not unkindly, because talk is easy, Evelyn, it's the doing that counts. She nodded, accepting that. When will you know more? About the legal situation? Davidson said, 48 hours. Once he verifies everything, we'll decide how to proceed. What do you want to happen? To my father? I considered the question. I want the money returned. I want him to face consequences for what he did. And I want him to know that he can't manipulate people without repercussions. He's gonna fight this. I know. But I'm done being pushed around by your family. Done accepting disrespect and theft like it's just something I have to tolerate. So let him fight. I'm ready. She moved closer, close enough to touch, but didn't reach for me. I'm sorry, for all of it, for not seeing what was happening, for not protecting you, for choosing wrong so many times. I know you are. Is that enough? Not yet, but maybe it's a start. We stood there in the fading afternoon light, two people trying to figure out if a broken thing could be fixed, or if some damage was permanent. I didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we might actually find it together. Davidson called exactly 48 hours later, just as he'd promised. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my phone lit up with his name. Mr. Collins, we've completed our independent review. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I'll be there in an hour. When I arrived, Davidson wasn't alone. Two other attorneys sat at the conference table, along with a woman I didn't recognize, who introduced herself as Patricia Chen, the financial crime specialist he'd mentioned. Thank you for coming, Davidson began. We've verified everything in your documents. Patricia, would you walk him through what we found? She opened a laptop and turned it toward me. Mr. Collins, the situation is actually worse than your initial assessment suggested. The $473,000 you identified is only part of it. There are additional transfers we traced, older ones, going back almost to the beginning of your marriage. Total amount is closer to $750,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $750,000, stolen over 7 years. Harold Thornwell has been systematically draining your joint accounts and investment portfolios, Patricia continued. He used his position as your wife's financial advisor to gain access, then created a network of shell companies to obscure the destination of the funds. The money ultimately ended up in accounts controlled by him, though proving that will require subpoenas and forensic accounting testimony. What about Evelyn? I asked, my voice tight. What's her liability? Davidson stepped in. Based on the documents, she signed authorization forms, but there's substantial evidence she was misled about their purpose. The language in the forms is deliberately vague, and there are emails we recovered where Harold explicitly told her you were aware and approved of the transfers. She has a strong defense that she was manipulated. I sat back, processing everything. So what are our options? Several, Davidson said, ticking them off on his fingers. 1, we file a civil suit for recovery of the funds plus damages. 2, we report this to law enforcement and pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and wire fraud. 3, we do both. Or 4, we negotiate a private settlement where Harold returns everything quietly and we don't pursue legal action. What do you recommend? Davidson's expression hardened. Given the amount involved and the deliberate nature of the deception, I recommend option 3, civil suit and criminal referral. Men like Harold Thornwell need to face real consequences, or they simply do it again to someone else. Agreed, I said without hesitation. Move forward with both. Understood. We'll file the civil complaint by end of week. The criminal referral will go to the district attorney's office simultaneously. I should warn you, this will become public very quickly. The media will pick it up, especially given the Thornwell family's prominence in the community. Good, I said. Let it be public. I'm done protecting their reputation. Patricia closed her laptop. There's one more thing you should know. In tracing the money, we found that some of it was used to pay off personal debts Harold had accumulated. Gambling debts, specifically. He has a problem, Mr. Collins. A significant one. That's likely why he targeted your accounts in the first place. So Harold wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. That somehow made it worse. How long before he knows we're moving forward? I asked. The moment we file, which will be Friday morning, you'll want to prepare yourself and your wife for the fallout. I nodded. We will. The meeting wrapped up shortly after, and I left with copies of everything, evidence that would dismantle Harold's carefully constructed lies. As I walked to where James was waiting, my phone rang. Evelyn. Nathan, my father wants to meet with us. Both of us. Tonight. He says it's important. I almost laughed. Of course he did. He must have sensed something was coming, must have realized his carefully built house of cards was starting to collapse. Tell him yes, I said. Tell him we'll meet him at Ashford Estate at 7. Are you sure? Maybe we should wait until... No more waiting, Evelyn. It's time. That evening, James drove us both to the estate. Evelyn sat beside me in the back of the Rolls-Royce, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She'd been quiet since I picked her up, processing everything I'd told her about the additional funds, about the gambling debts, about what was coming. Are you ready for this? I asked as we turned onto the long driveway. She took a deep breath. No, but I'm doing it anyway. The estate looked different at night. The warm afternoon light that had softened its edges was gone, replaced by harsh security lighting that made it look cold, institutional. Harold's car was already there, along with several others I didn't recognize. We walked in together, and I was surprised to find not just Harold waiting, but Victor, Piper, and several other family members gathered in the great room. An ambush, then. Harold had called in reinforcements. Nathan, Evelyn, Harold said, standing as we entered. His voice was warm, controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Thank you for coming. Please, sit. We'll stand, I said. Harold's smile tightened. Very well. I asked you here because there seems to be some confusion about certain financial matters. Some misunderstandings that I'd like to clear up before they spiral into something unfortunate. Misunderstandings, I repeated flatly. Is that what you're calling embezzlement now? The room went silent. Victor's eyes widened. Piper's hand flew to her mouth. Harold's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath, before he composed himself. That's a very serious accusation, Nathan. One you should be careful about making without evidence. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I have all the evidence I need. Bank records, transfer documents, shell company registrations. $750,000, Harold. That's how much you've stolen from us over the past 7 years. Evelyn stood straighter beside me. He's telling the truth, Dad. I've seen the records. You lied to me. You told me Nathan knew that this was all legitimate financial planning. But it wasn't. You stole from us. Harold's face reddened. Evelyn, you don't understand the complexity of... Don't, she cut him off, her voice sharp. Don't try to manipulate me again. I trusted you. I signed documents because you're my father, and I believed you had our best interests at heart. But you didn't. You used me to steal from my husband. Victor stood up. Dad, what is she talking about? What's going on? Harold turned on him. Stay out of this, Victor. This is between me and them. No, I said firmly. This involves all of you. Because you've all benefited from treating me like I was nothing. From dismissing me, mocking me, making me feel like I didn't belong. Well, now you know the truth. I'm not the failure you all assumed I was. And your patriarch isn't the honorable man you thought he was. Piper found her voice. This is insane. Uncle Harold would never. He did, Evelyn said, turning to face her. And I was too blind to see it because I was so focused on pleasing all of you. On maintaining the family image. On being who you expected me to be instead of who I should have been. Harold's composure finally cracked completely. You ungrateful. He stepped toward me aggressively, but I didn't back down. Careful, I said quietly. We're filing both civil and criminal charges on Friday. Anything you do or say right now will only make things worse for you. He froze, the implications hitting him. You can't be serious. Completely serious. You stole from us. You manipulated your own daughter. You committed fraud. and you're going to face the consequences." "I'll fight this," he said, voice shaking with rage. "I have resources, attorneys. I'll destroy you." "You can try," I said calmly. But unlike 7 years ago when I had nothing, I now have everything I need to win. Money, evidence, and most importantly, the truth. Evelyn moved closer to me, a deliberate choice that everyone in the room noticed. "And he has me, standing beside him. Not behind you anymore, Dad. Those days are over." The room erupted then, Victor demanding explanations, Piper crying, other family members talking over each other. Through it all, Harold stood frozen, watching his world collapse around him. I took Evelyn's hand. "We're leaving now. My attorneys will be in touch." We walked out together, leaving the chaos behind us. As we reached the car, I heard Harold shouting something from inside, but I didn't look back. James opened the door for us, and we climbed in. As we pulled away from the estate, Evelyn let out a long, shaky breath. "I can't believe I just did that." "You did well," I told her. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "They're going to hate me, cut me off, say terrible things." "Probably," I agreed. "Is it worth it?" She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in years I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. Clear-eyed, honest, brave. "Yes," she said, "you're worth it." 6 months later, I sat in the same corner office where this had all begun, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and amber. The view never got old, but tonight it felt different, peaceful in a way it hadn't before. The civil suit had been settled 3 weeks ago. Harold returned every penny he'd taken, plus damages and legal fees. The criminal charges were still pending, but the district attorney was confident they had enough evidence for a conviction. Harold was facing 5 to 10 years, though his attorneys were negotiating a plea deal. The Thornwell family had fractured. Some sided with Harold, refusing to believe he'd done anything wrong. Others, like Evelyn's mother surprisingly, had distanced themselves from him entirely. Family gatherings no longer existed. The estate had been put up for sale to cover Harold's mounting legal fees and gambling debts. Evelyn had kept her promise. She'd stood beside me through every deposition, every court appearance, every ugly revelation. When her family turned on her, called her a traitor, tried to manipulate her into dropping the charges, she'd held firm. It hadn't been easy. I'd heard her crying in the bathroom some nights, grieving the loss of relationships she'd once treasured. But she never wavered. We'd started marriage counseling, a good therapist who didn't let either of us hide behind excuses or deflection. The work was hard, painful often, but necessary. We were rebuilding trust one honest conversation at a time. My business continued to thrive. Word had gotten out about what happened. Not all the details, but enough. And surprisingly, it had enhanced my reputation rather than damaged it. People respected someone who stood up for themselves, who didn't let powerful families push them around. The Rolls-Royce sat in my garage most days now. I'd made my point. Didn't need to keep making it. These days I drove whatever felt right. Sometimes the Rolls when I had important meetings. Sometimes my old Ford, because it was comfortable and familiar. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "Dinner at home tonight? I'm cooking." I smiled and typed back. "Perfect. I'll be there by 7. She'd moved back in 2 months ago, after we'd both agreed we wanted to really try. Not just stay together out of obligation or history, but actively choose each other every day. It was working, slowly, but genuinely. I stood and walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. 7 years ago, I'd been a different person, or maybe just a person in different circumstances. Either way, I'd learned things I wished I hadn't needed to learn. That respect demanded by force isn't real respect. That hiding who you are to avoid judgment only delays the inevitable. That sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. And that standing up for yourself, even when it costs you everything, is the only way to discover what you're really worth. I thought about that family reunion, about walking up those steps in my discount jacket and scuffed shoes. About the looks, the whispers, the casual cruelty disguised as jokes. About the moment the Rolls-Royce pulled up and everything shifted. But the car hadn't changed anything, not really. It had just revealed what was already true. That worth isn't measured by what you own or wear or drive. It's measured by how you treat people, how you face adversity, how you choose integrity over convenience. Harold had lost everything chasing approval and appearances. I'd gained everything by stopping the chase entirely. My office door opened and my assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Collins, your last meeting canceled. You're free for the evening." "Thank you, Sarah. Have a good night." "You too, sir." I gathered my things, turned off my computer, and took one last look at the city sprawling below. Then I left, not in a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, but in my own car, driving myself home to my wife, to the life we were building together on foundations of honesty instead of pretense. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Evelyn through the kitchen window. She was laughing at something, probably a cooking mishap, her hair pulled back, wearing an old sweater. She looked happy. Real. I sat in the car for a moment, just watching her, grateful for second chances and hard-won wisdom. Then I got out and went inside, ready to choose her again, the way she'd finally learned to choose me. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.